Welcome back. So now that you have your Excel sheet with all the data you need and we're starting to plot, I'll show you two ways that you can do plots in Google Sheets and another application online free that I prefer because it allows you to do 3D charts. So when I left you last time, we had converted all the timestamps into time hacks starting at 0 for minutes, seconds, and then I gave you a challenge and to see if you could determine how to create a column for minutes and a column for seconds that you could use to correlate it to the data of the video. So if you looked at a specific row of the data and it said it was at 10 minutes and 3 seconds, you could go down to the video and at the exact same time, your data should match what it was recording at the time of the video. So now let's get to the Excel sheet again. We created a workbook. One thing I've actually learned is this file is getting too big and it tends to crash. So unless you're able to download it and use it on like a Microsoft Excel or something like that, you might start crashing it. So even though in the previous video we actually combine all the data, which is great to keep all your data in one location, if you're going to actually export it and use it in that online application that I'm going to show you, you will need to actually save each individual sheet as the tab, each tab as its own sheet, because there's too much information. But let's assume that you create most of the plots on Google Sheets because you can, most of them with the exception of a couple, then you should be fine. So going back here again, we left you off at that time hack in minutes and time hack in seconds. So I'm going to show you how you would actually create the columns for second and time for minutes and seconds. So to do the middle minutes one, it's pretty much the minute time column, but there's a function called round down, which will round it to the whole number. And basically, if you tell it to round the number in that column for the time, it should only give you the minutes. And we don't have to show any decimals, so you pretty much can select that entire column D and say, hey, I want whole numbers. Another thing is you could technically convert your hack time into whole numbers by just clicking that, and it does the same as rounding. With the exception when you get to like decimals greater than 0.5. So I prefer the round down function. It's more accurate. It won't give you those errors. So this column is now your minutes, and let's do now the seconds. If it doesn't freeze, which there's a chance it just did, which is fine. All the data is being saved in the background. I just have to close it, reopen it, and do that struggle again. So again, if you can download it, or hopefully you don't have that issue of it crashing if you don't have a lot of data. But again, we have, I believe, most of the data calculated already. So again, going to installations, this was my minute column. I'm going to add my seconds column to the right of that. And this one now, the way we're going to do that, it's going to be actually your hack time in seconds. So column C, subtracted by your minute column we just created, multiplied by 60 seconds to convert it into the same units. And by taking that difference, you're pretty much taking that whole number and subtracting it from the one that has a decimal. So you're going to be left off with just the second increments. Now, it didn't give me the option of doing it for everything, so I will double click here. At the corner bottom, it should be calculating it for me. There you go. And now for this column, we actually do have to show one decimal because it's increments of 0.1. So if you don't do that, it will start looking wonky. So one decimal increment, there you go. So now we have column D, which is in minutes. It's the minute column. If it doesn't freeze on me again, technology. Sometimes it just makes life harder. But now that you have your column for minutes and seconds, you should be able to correlate all that data from the video to your sensor data of your cell phones. I've already gone that back and done that to every single sheet. So all my data has a column for minutes, seconds, and so on. Again, I'm going to try and save that column and say minutes. And then second. So again, it should be easy for me to go into the video and find stuff. Now, a little trick, I'm not gonna click it because it might crash on me again. Double click those little cells right there, and it should fix the width of it to be shrunk to just enough width you need. Another thing I would recommend is pretty much going around and reducing the number of decimals for stuff you don't need. So for example, for speed, miles per hours, just a whole number is fine. One other thing I was thinking about, remember how we did the altitude in feet and I did a whole number, not in the video but after. uh, I was thinking, well, that's telling me from mean sea level from the altitude of water, but what if I really wanted to know what was the altitude from the ground, right? So in that case, I would actually add another column and say, hey, this is now going to be my altitude of AGL. So if you remember, above the ground level, and feet as well still. So now, in order to calculate that, what you're trying to do is find out what's the altitude at the start of your altitude. You could Google it. You could look at your phone and see what's the lowest number it's recording. For this case, I believe it was 4,218 feet. And pretty much subtract that from every single reading. And you'll be able to calculate your zero start and then the highest altitude you go. So it would make it easier for some of the test cards where you're just looking at altitude increments of 1,000 to write a specific number versus starting at an altitude of mean sea level. But again, that one should be more closer to the dial because again, remember you have that sensor, the indicated altitude, which is not reading above the ground level. It's reading based on like the atmosphere pressure, what the altitude is. So that one's actually would be closer to that altitude column of mean sea level. But, you know, if you wanted to get an idea of how far off the ground you were, that's a great idea. So now we have all that information. So how do you plot in Google Sheets? Well, it's kind of easy. And at the same time, kind of, I don't like it. And I'll show you why. So let's say I wanted to plot my speed over time. I'll select the column. There's this little insert chart. It will automatically create a chart for you and put that data. Now, my x-axis should be my time. I will select my time in seconds as my x-axis. And now if I wanted to customize it and add, major minor tick marks, which help for the analysis, you should be able to go under grid lines and ticks under customize and turn all of these checkboxes on for both your vertical and your horizontal axes. So now here, you have your speed, miles per hour, and if I wanted to change my chart title on my x-axis, which is my horizontal, I could say, hey, that is time in seconds. So now I have time, speed, and miles per hour, and you could start creating charts that will help you with your analysis. So here's one chart. Another one that I know will help me will be the altitude, be it if I do above the ground level or if I do a regular altitude in terms of mean sea level. So if I were just to do the mean sea level one, insert a new chart. Again, my x-axis will still be my time. It's what allows all my charts to be synchronized. And I'm using the seconds one. Again, I'll customize it, add a chart title in my horizontal and say that is again time in seconds. And now, as you know it, like my grid lines, they make analysis easier for both my vertical and my horizontal. So now here I have two charts. Both are telling me two separate pieces of information. But the part that starts becoming interesting and where you can start getting more information is like, okay, well, I know these two charts have the exact same time. The aspect ratio of them are identical. So if I start stacking them, technically these lines would match up. And if you tell, they kind of do. So you could start looking and saying, okay, well, at what altitude did I actually start changing? What was my speed of the ground? Again, this is not indicated airspeed. This is ground speed. It's the relationship of your phone's change in distance or displacement of the ground, not your indicated airspeed, which again, that's based on what is your current speed that you're going in through the air. Because you could have your plane, your glider flying in, but then you have headwind, which is kind of slowing it down. So you might think ground wise, you're going like 60 miles an hour, but in reality, in the air, you might be going slower because the wind is pushing you backwards and you're kind of actually flying slower. It's all in relationship perspectives. So again, you can start plotting and saying, hey, at a specific altitude change at this timestamp, because you're able to actually go in here and it will give you the little dots of like, hey, this dot point is timestamp blah, um, like 250 seconds, and you'll know what my altitude is. My sheets are acting out, but you should be able to click on the lines here, um, and there you go, and basically know, okay, at time 275 my altitude was 4,897. So at that exact time, in terms of speed, 275, what was my speed? So in here, if I go 275, somewhere around there, was like about 65 miles per hour. And again, you can find the same thing using the column here and looking at the time video and synchronizing and trying to figure out, okay, at this time in the video, the dial said I was at this indicated airspeed. What was that equivalent to ground speed? Let me check my chart. Okay, that's what it was, and so on. And again, you could do it from the visual perspective of like a chart, or you could literally use your table and find the exact same time hack and say, "Yep, that was my speed." Multiple ways of doing it. Again, it just depends how you tell a story, and they do say a picture is worth 1,000 words or 100 words. But again, it's all depending on how you as an engineer want to tell a story and how the audience will take it. So that is one way of how you could plot. Again, Google Sheets is easy to plot 1D plots, as long as you have like that time column. But now, what if you want to do a 3D plot of your entire flight, right? So if you want to have a bird's eye view of if you were a bird flying above you and looking down, how did that flight path look? And then how does it look in 3D? Because again, you did change in altitude as you were flying. So Google Sheets can't do that, but there is another application that can. Unfortunately, what you have to do for that, because this file is too big, you have to export um, each of these sheets, which I know it's unproductive in the sense of I asked you to combine them all, um, but I promise it's worth it. So make a copy into a new spreadsheet, click open that spreadsheet once it creates that, and you will be extracting pretty much each sheet that way, and you just have to resave it. So I could say here, file, make a copy, and just save it, what it is. In this case, it's position. And I'm going to save it in the same folder where I have all my data, so I know it's mine. So again, 2024, glider data, day 1, here's my flight, and I'm just going to save it in here. Click save. And again, I'm making a copy of it. So as all these sheets are opening, you can close the previous ones. But basically, I have a sheet now here called position. It's my data. Doesn't have all the other ones, so the file is smaller. And I can now download it. And now that I've downloaded it into my machine, if I now go, and I'll make sure to post a link on the bottom to chartstudio.plotty.com/create/pound sign, or as some of you know it as hashtag / I can now import that file that I just downloaded from Google Drive, and I could create this additional um, file that I want to show you guys. So I will upload that file. It should take a little bit of time, not a lot, but I'll show you how to create a 3D chart. So again, it imports all your information, and the quick way to start this is you'll start a trace, and you could do multiple types. Here we're gonna do a 3D line, and if you remember, your x-axis is your latitude. So I'll go here, choose latitude. My y-axis will be my longitude, and my z will be my altitude. Now you could do altitude in terms of above the ground, or you could do altitude in terms of mean sea level. Because I wanted to represent a 3D plot of where I was physically on Earth, I'm gonna stick to the mean sea level. So voila, I have now a image that I could rotate and kind of see how my flight path was. I could clearly see here where I started. If I zoom out, right there in that little dot, that is my ground start, and then I kind of fly, go up, change, and then come back all the way down and land. And you could even tell it kind of, they landed in the same spot but a little bit off. If I click home, again, you're able to see all this information, additional stuff that is not as clear sometimes when you start thinking in multi-dimension. But what if I wanted to create my bird's eye view of this top view? Well, you could create another trace, and now it will be a 2D plot, a simple line, and my x-axis will still be my latitude, and my y-axis will still be my longitude. And now under subplot, you're able to organize these charts in a way where you should be able to see it more clearly. So if I make the top corner here my 3D plot, and I make the bottom corner my 2D plot, you can see I have my bird's eye view on the bottom, and I have my top view of my 3D plot. Right, and I could rotate it, I could get an idea of what I was doing where, what exactly. But if I put them in the top view, they should look the same. Again, one might be a little bit smoother because it's not connecting the line straight. That's fine. But again, you see, you learn where you're able to see more information. So again, make sure you label every axis. So this is my latitude. In degrees, always include your units. Here is my longitude. In degrees as well. And this is a bird's eye view pretty much of that entire flight. Now, the same plots that we created in Google Sheets, you could add here. It's a little bit more difficult once you start adding multiple stuff when you do traces of the same type. But if you still do another line, a simple line, I'm not going to use the same axes as I did for my other 2D here, which is the latitude and longitude. So I'm going to create two separate axes. And now I'm going to choose my data. So I'm going to choose my, let's do the speed over time again. So for time in x-axis, I'll use seconds. And for my speed, I'll use miles per hour. And I know it looks like it's right on top of that, but if you go under subplot and you go to x2, y2, here it's saying how it's anchoring or it's overlaying with my previous plot. I don't want that, so I just say none, none. And I'm now able to create this additional chart where I have my information. Now I want it to anchor to itself, so that's the y2 and the x2. And I could include its plots titles again. So again, in this case, we have my, again, time in seconds for my x-axis. I have my, this was speed, ground speed. So you could say ground speed or speed, up to you. I like to tell them what it is, and it's in miles per hour. And now I'm going to add one last chart, which If you guessed it right, you'll know what I'm thinking of, which is my altitude. But in this time, and again, I need different axes for these. Um, I want it this time, instead of being the altitude above mean sea level, I want it above the ground. So again, time x-axis will be seconds, and my altitude will be above the ground level in feet. And now this is a nice, interesting plot, right? Because you could overlay it and see all the information, but at the same time, you don't have to do that. If you collapse here, go to Y3, you could tell it again, hey, I don't want to overlay it against anything else before. I want it to be on its own, so that's Y3 and X3. And I want it to be on its own. So these are none, and I'm going to track it and put it back down in the little corner there. Now, fun thing is, because I use the same time, you see how the lines actually line up. So again, I know that this one here is my altitude above the ground level, and it's in feet. So they share the same times because I use the same times. They're all synchronized because we synchronize the data by starting the sensors the same. Or actually, forgot to mention, if by any chance one of the sensors started a bit earlier, you could always delete that sensor line and make sure they all kind of start at the same time. You'll just use one data point, but again, you're collecting so many data points, it's not going to make a difference in your analysis. But look, these lines match because it's synchronized. So at a specific location, you will know what the ground speed, the altitude was, what the location was. And you could do the same thing for what was my acceleration at that exact moment, and so on, if you were able to get all that data into one sheet and load it here. So that's how you kind of start plotting data, start looking at it, trying to make sense. And the one thing I'll show you before I finish this video is, again, if you wanted to overlay these two more on top, how we did it before, you could do that based on the overlay. So if you wanted to overlay just the x-axis because they share that, you could say, hey, overlay it with the time S, the one up there. And in terms of here, I'm not going to overlay anything, but here, if I do the time here as well, there's one. Where is it? Is it the anchor? I think it's the anchor. I want time. Oh yeah, this time. There is a way. I think I just forgot it. Let's see. I want my time to be anchored. First time. That time. I wanted to overlay with the ground speed. Not the ground speed, it was the time. And this one is none. No, it's not letting me. But you could, there is a way, I am not lying, where you could, in the beginning, as you notice, before I snap them off out of each other, where you could tell them to pretty much overlay the boundaries with each other. So I'm saying, hey, anchor it to its own y-axis, its own x, its own y, its own x, and I want it to overlay with the time. Why would it not let me? Like, it's that, and the time should be the same. It's not letting me right now. I wonder if it's because it's not free there? No? Well, if you guys figure out, let me know. I had it and I can't seem to figure it out anymore. But again, if you were to stack it on top of each other, you could overlay the information and start to more clearly understand at what time what was happening across all the sensors, which you could do by using the charts as well. It just depends on who you're presenting to, how you as an engineer understand. But once all the information is created, you could create an account or just take a screenshot of it, save your plots, and use it in Google Sheets to continue to do your analysis. So this is how you start plotting. We looked at, different ways of also addressing some of the data in terms of above the ground. I will probably go and create one last video of showing you how I will use this plots to extract information from actually a test card to kind of give you an idea of how to do that, but more importantly, to see the accuracy level between a GoPro camera of what the instrumentation is telling you versus your cell phone. So I hope you were able to follow along. If you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comment section. And if you need, if this video was a little bit too fast, go back, replay it, take your time, create your plots, try different combinations of plots and understanding, based on my change in altitude over time, can I calculate what my rate of increase was just from that? Again, there's different math calculations you could do. It's not just what you collected, it's all the additional information you can derive. So have fun, and I hope you challenge yourself to learn more. Have a good one.